very good evening and a warm welcome to State of Business on Art Television. I'm Hishain Alia. Let's have a look at the headlines first. EU's concerns over Sri Lanka's import restrictions is an overreaction presented too early. Central Bank Governor stresses. Central Bank introduces a maximum interest rate on mortgage-backed housing loans obtained by salaried employees. News in detail. The Central Governor Professor W.D. Lakshman stresses that the recent joint statement by the EU countries on the concerns over the import restrictions imposed by the government of Sri Lanka is probably an overreaction presented too early. Joining the last monetary policy review of the CBSL conducted in the Zoom platform today, CBSL Governor further added that as per the regulations of the World Trade Organization, governments can take special measures to resolve its balance of payment issues, especially in a global pandemic situation.
Perhaps this statement which was publicized here from the EU countries and the EU organization is probably an overreaction presented too early. At a time we are trying to resolve our balance of payments problem. Even under WTO rules, I think the country is allowed to do certain things which are needed to meet balance of payments problems. And in any case, I believe that this kind of issue can be resolved with adequate discussions among the parties concerned. And I think our external relations authorities are probably taking up this matter for discussion between Sri Lankan authorities and the relevant EU authorities.
We studied the impact of import restrictions on imports from those countries, and it seems that the impact is quite minimal. So as you know, most of the import restrictions are on non-essential imports, including motor vehicles, and also on the imports of particularly agricultural goods that are coming because the government wants to promote domestic production of agricultural goods. So the government has re-emphasized the need to maintain some of these restrictions on non-essential imports, but that does not mean that the imports from the European Union have reduced in the past, and we don't expect that going forward as well.
Furthermore, Director of Economic Research Department of Central Bank, Dr. C. Amarasekara states that CBSL has decided to maintain the standing deposit facility rate and the standing lending facility rate of the Central Bank at their current levels of 4.5% and 5.5% respectively. Additionally, in respect to the concessional loan schemes proposed by the government in the Budget 2021, the Monetary Board has decided to introduce a maximum interest rate on mortgage-backed housing loans obtained by salaried employees from licensed banks with only 7% annum for such loans, at least for the first 5 years of the loan tenure.
The decision at the Monetary Board meeting yesterday was to maintain the current policy interest rates unchanged at the levels observed now. So the standing deposit facility rate is maintained at 4.5%, standing lending facility rate at 5.5%, and the bank rate at 8.5%. Also, the statutory reserve ratio is maintained at 2%. The additional decisions that were made yesterday was to introduce a maximum interest rate applicable on mortgage-backed housing loans obtained by salaried employees. This scheme is available for salaried employees in the private and public sectors, and also for mortgage-backed housing loans. So the banks can continue to follow their all their prudential norms in providing housing loans to these salaried workers, where the risk to banks will be very low because there will be a continued flow of, there is a low risk of non-performing loans in relation to such loans. At the same time, we have been careful to ensure that this will not create an additional sort of property market bubble, because these are only for mortgage-backed housing loans.
In the meantime, the central bank announced that the CBSO, together with the government, has disbursed 179 billion rupees for the SME sector in the country at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic.
If you look at what the central bank and the government have done so far, I think we have disbursed about 179 billion for the benefits of SME sector. And those are ranging from very small loans to loans up to 25 million. And also the central bank has announced recently about the enhancing the grace period given for the repayment of those loans. And also you may have seen the government, the Minister of Finance has signed a loan agreement with ADB for 165 million. I think this is also aimed at, that's about little more than 30 billion rupees. And those money also will be channeled towards revival of SMEs. And then the central bank is also looking at focusing its ongoing lending programs, which are administered through the Regional Development Department, to have better focus on SME sector. So I think the government and the central bank have taken the SME sector very seriously. And I think, so we have met the demand of the SME sector to a great extent. And then with the other arrangements in the pipeline, if there's any gap, those will also be bridged in the coming months. Thank you.
Education Minister Professor G.L. Pierce today said that the government is still positive on the conducting of the GCE ordinary level examination as planned, but the final decision over the examination will be taken only within a period of 7 to 10 days. Addressing a media briefing online this afternoon, the Education Minister also asserted that the matters such as covering up of the syllabus, introduction of any cut-off points could be discussed only after the decision of conducting examination was once finalized.
I think the logical way to set about it would be first to evaluate the situation in those parts of the country where schools cannot be opened for O-level students, and to examine whether it is possible to resume classes without jeopardizing the health of the students. That is the first decision to be made. So we would like to wait a few days and assess the situation, maybe, as I said, in about a week or 10 days. Then if we decide to go ahead with the exam, that is not a final decision that has been made at this moment, but if we do decide to go ahead with the examination, then we would consider what the modalities are, whether some degree of flexibility is appropriate in the circumstances, and there we can draw upon the experience of other countries which had to face the same situation and which has evolved pragmatic strategies for handling the conduct of examinations under these circumstances.
Stay tuned for more news right after this commercial break. Welcome back after the break. The governor of the Eastern Province, Anuradha Yahapat, states that it has been decided to close all schools in the Kalman education zone for a period of 1 week from tomorrow after the identification of several COVID-19 positive patients from the area. Accordingly, 502 new COVID-19 cases were identified in the country yesterday, and most number of cases were found from Colombo district. Also, the Ministry of Health says that another 369 patients who had previously tested positive for COVID-19 have been discharged from hospital after total recovery. This brings the total number of COVID-19 recoveries in the country to 15,816. Also, the Department of Government Information yesterday stated that Gulugahatanna, Telbugahawatha, Gramanildar divisions of the Alawatugoda police jurisdiction of the Kandy district have been isolated, along with the Atalugama East, Epitamulla and Kolumadiriya Gramanildari divisions of the Bandaragama police jurisdiction. Moreover, Kirimanthudua Gramanildari division of the Bandaragama police jurisdiction is no longer under lockdown. It was also stated yesterday that the 45 schools within the Kandy city limits will remain closed until 4th December. Also, it was announced that today it has been decided to close all schools in the Kalman education zone for a period of 1 week from tomorrow. The all-share price index at the end of the trading yesterday closed in positive year-to-date returns territory for the first time in 2020. The SPI closed at 6,141.79 points, which is 0.21% higher than the figure recorded at the start of the 2020, marking a turnaround in the index, which at its lowest point this year recorded minus 30.6% year-to-date on 12th May. Colombo Stock Exchange shows that ASPI increased by 54.1 points to close at 6,141.8, while the more liquid S&P SL20 index also increased by 16.2 points to close at 2,416.2. Turnover stood at 2.5 billion rupees versus 12-month average daily turnover of 1.6 billion rupees. Licensed stockbrokers said the bourse witnessed an uptick for the second consecutive session, although recording turnover below the one-month average for the 10th straight session. They also said that the market closed with turnover reaching a 4-day high and the SPI moving into positive territory year-to-date. The SPI has been strong gains since the lifting of the lockdowns in May, breaching the 6,000 mark in early October. Materials sector was the top contributor to the market turnover, while the sector index gained 3.37%. The share price of dipped products increased by 18 rupees and 30 cents, or by 5.83%, closing at 332 rupees and 40 cents, while foreign holdings decreased by 245,845 shares. Capital goods sector was the second highest contributor to the market, while the sector index increased by 1.60%. The share price of John Keel's holdings appreciated by 1.66% to close at 147 rupees and 40 cents. Media Minister Kehliya Rambukwala clarifies that it was only decided to make the social media institutions register under the Media Ministry during the Ministerial Consultative Committee on the Mass Media held last Saturday, and he says that it was not decided to monitor those. Mr. Rambukwala made these observations in response to queries posed by National People's Power parliamentarian Dr. Harini Amarasuriya during yesterday's parliamentary debate on the allocations for the Ministry of Foreign Ministry, State Ministry of Regional Cooperation and Ministry of Media.
Government efforts at regulation are viewed with particular suspicion. Sri Lankan governments usually do not have a good reputation for dealing with media. In fact, Sri Lanka at various points during the last several decades was considered extremely dangerous for those working in this field. The list of media personnel who have disappeared, been killed, threatened, intimidated and forced to leave the country is far too long. But it is in this context that we need to seriously consider this proposal reported in the Parliament website that the Honourable Minister for Mass Media has stated at the Consultative Committee meeting on Mass Media held on the 21st of November that a website regulatory mechanism will be implemented within the next 2 weeks. Can such an important and crucial regulatory mechanism be implemented within or established within 2 weeks?
In fact, all these moves are discussed at the consultative committee. It is not moved by me particularly, and this was discussed at length. It took 1.5 hours, and I think one of the longest sessions that we had. And in that, it was one of your members, one of the members of the committee suggested that there should be some kind of monitoring of the social media. Whereas when I was the minister then, we had numerous discussions as to how you deal with this situation. And then, firstly, as a primary move, we discussed that all social media institutions to be registered under the Ministry of Mass Media. And that is exactly what we discussed. It has been misinformed completely that we are going to have a monitoring body with regard to the Facebook and so on. But it was just a registration which all the people agreed at that time. They said to safeguard their dignity. And that should be the case. And we had only a debate over the price. We had 100,000 for a registration and 25,000 for annual fee, which they requested to make 25,000 a registration fee and 5,000 annual fee, which we readily agreed then in 2014. Unfortunately, during the 5 years, nothing happened, and therefore we took it up the first consultative meeting. We took up this, and there were so many things that flow out of the flow of the consultative committee. So that is exactly so. I'm sure you are completely misled.
Moreover, several other ministers and parliamentarians from both government and opposition sides actively joined in the budget debate on the foreign ministry yesterday.
We must reach out to them. We must reach out to the whole world. We shouldn't pick and choose as to whom we want to deal with. As much as we deal with the US, we must deal with Russia, we must deal with China, we must deal with the United Kingdom, we must deal with France. All the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council must be briefed continuously on the good work that we have done to promote reconciliation in this country.
To be successful, the government must also demonstrate that it places democracy, rule of law, independent institutions and credible and transparent governance above individual self-interest and, might I add, in our case, above the interest of one family. In case the foreign ministry is not aware, economic diplomacy cannot be conducted in a vacuum. Economic diplomacy is not a one-way street, and the economy is linked to the political and the governance realms. It is sound. Is it sound or sensible economic diplomacy to kick Sri Lanka's long-standing development partner, Japan, which the previous speaker spoke highly of, in its face by cancelling the light rail project with JICA funding? Does the government expect Japanese investors to invest in this country in this backdrop?
Now I'm talking of the dignity of the living. Now the question of the dignity of the dead is a matter of contention. Now, in this regard, I have in fact interjected when the Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs spoke 2 days ago in this House, referred to the Organization of Islamic Countries, the Organization of Islamic Conference. All the resident ambassadors representing those countries here appealed to His Excellency the President to reconsider the cremation-only policy regarding the COVID-19 victims. And that letter has, so far, that request has not been acceded to.
It must be the duty of the Foreign Ministry and the government to make sure where Sri Lanka is in a geopolitical hotspot and is a very strategically important country, that Sri Lanka does not be made a political football where great powers compete and that ultimately Sri Lanka stands to lose.
Stay tuned for stock updates. Welcome back after the break. The trading at Colombo Stock Exchange ended on a positive note today. The All-Share Price Index gained 6.33 points to close at 6,148.12, and the S&P SL20 gained 7.48 points to close at 2,423.66. The turnover was 1.9 billion rupees and over 69 million shares were traded. Up next are Forex rates. And with that, we'll be winding up for today. See you tomorrow with State of Business at the usual time. Until then, take care and good night.